Zimbabwe is suffering its worst drought in more than a century, and the United Nations blames climate change as a major driver of the crisis. According to the UN's World Food Program, the African nation needs more than $200 million in emergency aid to help prevent malnutrition for millions of women and children. Our Debora Patta has been following this story and joins us now from Johannesburg, South Africa. Debora.
Anne-Marie, well, it's certainly a very, very bad crisis indeed. Perhaps this story illustrates it best. We know of a 72-year-old woman who suffers from diabetes. She would normally get her food by growing her own crops from subsistence farming. But earlier rains and now the drought have destroyed any chance of that. So she has to buy food. Not only is there a shortage of food to buy, but she cannot afford to buy both her medication and her food. So she has to choose. Some days she goes without her medication, other days she simply goes hungry. And this illustrates just how dire the situation is. Aid organizations have told us that after Syria, this is the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. Over half the population of Zimbabwe, that's over 7.7 million people, are being pushed to the brink of starvation. There's a desperate cycle of malnutrition, mainly affecting women and children. And also the rains forecast for the next harvest, which is in April, are very poor. So it's likely to get a lot worse before there is any improvement in the situation. Zimbabwe is also known for its magnificent wildlife. This is a huge tourist attraction, but that is also suffering. Already over 50 elephants have died in the national reserves because of starvation, because their water sources have dried up. Anne-Marie?
Why is it affecting Zimbabwe so severely? I mean, other countries in the area are dealing with soaring temperatures as well.
You're quite right. For example, here in South Africa, we've also had soaring temperatures and drought in some areas. But the difference is stability. This is a democracy that is fairly stable. It has its problems, but nothing like Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, in addition to this drought and flooding earlier this year, is a country in economic crisis. I mean, think about it. For years, they've suffered from corruption. There's a lack of foreign currency, prolonged power outages, fuel shortages, rising inflation, runaway inflation, in fact, and mounting unemployment. And this is exacerbating the already problematic issues arising from the drought and the severe flooding. Even in the urban areas, you see long queues for food, for gas, for bread. And people there are saying that even if there was enough food, because of inflation, which has now risen to over 500%, incomes are being eroded and people simply cannot afford the food because the cost is so high.
Is it true that you can see the impact of this drought at the very sort of well-known tourist attraction, Victoria Falls?
You can indeed, and people are attributing this directly to climate change. The United Nations has said this is an unprecedented climate-driven disaster, and no better place illustrates this than Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls is a massive tourist attraction. The mighty Victoria Falls, which plunges hundreds of meters down into a gash in the earth, draws thousands of tourists every single year. It's normally lush, exquisite, a place that you want to behold, this wondrous marvel of nature. And now it's basically dried up to a mere trickle in some parts of the Vic Falls. And obviously this is affecting tourism, not to mention water supply sources and many other issues as it plunges into the Zambezi River. And it illustrates the problem in this country, is that what you're seeing driven by climate change is erratic temperatures. So you have soaring temperatures, prolonged dry spells, followed by flash floods. We had floods early in the year, which caused untold misery. Many people died. There was this huge destruction. And now you have the drought. So both affect crops. People cannot grow their foods. They're already hungry because of hyperinflation. And then you get this drought and climate change issues on top of it. You're seeing that what's happening is that it's occurring more frequently. So Zimbabwe has always suffered droughts, but they would be once every, 3-5 years. Now you're seeing it almost annually, sometimes twice a year.
Yeah, that's the thing about, when we talk about climate change here in North America, sometimes it can almost appear sort of theoretical because the impacts are not so immediate. But when you're already living very close to the edge and, of course, close to the land, any fluctuation can have a devastating impact. But let me ask you this question. There's always going to be people that say, isn't this something that's more cyclical? How do we know it's actually caused by climate change?
One doesn't know for 100% certainty, but the experts are saying that you're starting to see it occur more frequently. And that is an example of climate change. Bear this statistic in mind, Anne-Marie, that global temperatures are rising. In this part of the world, in southern Africa, it's twice the global average. Temperatures are rising at twice the global average. And you don't need to be a scientific expert to see the facts for yourself. What was once a lush breadbasket of the continent has now been driven into an absolute barren, drought-stricken area.
Debora Patta, thank you very much.